Today we're in the Rembrandt Huis for the exhibition Rembrandt, Goya, and Picasso. We spoke with Picasso expert Gerda van Ham, who is one of the editors of the catalogue that accompanies the show, and we asked her what the title of that book refers to.
Well, etched on the memory, you could say visual memory, is something like reading a book. If you do like a book very well, you are very in the story, and so you remember all things. And if you're not reading but just studying pieces of art, you could do the same in a way. You're so involved in the story or so involved in the images that you're studying it part, different details. And I think that's what Picasso did more or less. But you know, he had 3 moments of Rembrandt's ideas in the 30s, in the late 60s, and in the early 70s, just a couple of months before he died. And he was, well, in a way, Rembrandt was a father figure for him, or maybe an alter ego. And he was just very busy, even with the technique, the difficult technique of making an etching. And that was more or less not very common for every artist. He liked the way Rembrandt tells his stories and to combine it with the technique. So we do have some examples or subjects were very quite linked to each other. But he felt like some heroes like Manet, Degas, Grunewald, Ingres, Velázquez, and of course Rembrandt was always looking over his shoulders. So it was a sort of, well, you could say a play, a sort of identification, I think.
Some of the etchings actually are of Rembrandt, aren't they, in this show?
Yes, they are linked with each other, like a theme of Potiphar's wife. You probably know from the Old Testament. Well, that's a quite naughty story. And he borrowed the subject, more or less. But when you're studying the lino cut very carefully, you see the differences. It's very, well, bizarre. It's burlesque and baroque. And I don't know, but I think Rembrandt was very keen on that subject of Joseph, because he loved all the themes around Joseph and his brothers and his father and especially the wife of Potiphar.
And as some might not know, she was tempted to have sex and resisted. Therefore,
yes, well,
became a good wife, and in keeping with the 17th century moralizing and Jacob Katz, she did the right thing. And in Picasso's rendering, she seems to be in the tumble somehow.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of links with Rembrandt are quite naughty, bizarre. It's just a play. But I think there is some identification as well. He loved Rembrandt of his, I think, greatness and even to tell a story, like not reading a story in a book, but just the imagination of Rembrandt.
We also spoke with Isadora Rose, one of the world's foremost experts on the graphics of Goya.
Well, Rembrandt was a kind of a true master for Goya, but they never knew each other. Rembrandt lived in the 17th century, Goya lived in the late 18th, early 19th century, so we're not talking about a direct connection of master to pupil. We're talking about what one artist learns when he looks at the works of another artist. So in a sense, we're talking about a master-pupil relationship, but it's a master-pupil relationship that isn't physical, but that is via the art. In other words, Goya was looking at Rembrandt and talking to him via the art, and learning from him via the art.
Now, he didn't really copy Rembrandt. He did have access to some of the prints. Mm-hmm. What would you say then was the relationship artistically between Rembrandt and Goya?
Well, Rembrandt is a kind of an ideal, isn't he, for a lot of artists, not only Goya. So that Goya, in looking at Rembrandt prints, is looking at the best. When he has to do his own prints, he's looking at the prints of another great painter printmaker. And he's learning things about technique, about composition, about compositional weight. Do you smack the figures down right in the middle of the composition, or do you put them slightly to one side? No, do you give a 2/3, 1/3, or 60-40 kind of relationship to your figures? Do you put little figures behind your main figures? Where do you put the shadow? Do you put the shadow in the foreground? Do you put it in the background? Do you put it in the middle ground? I think this is the type of thing that Goya is interested in when he's looking at Rembrandt. No, he's learning things that an artist needs to know in order to make a convincing image. That's what he's looking for. That's what he's looking at when he's looking at Rembrandt. He's not copying, no, and he's not imitating. He's learning. He's learning the tricks of the trade.
Now, during Goya's lifetime, Napoleon invaded Spain, and there was a lot of atrocities associated with that. And out of that came one of Goya's strongest group of paintings. How was that related to Rembrandt?
Well, in Goya, in general, you have a lot more violence, a lot more imagery of violence than you do in Rembrandt. But I think there are certain Rembrandt prints, like the lion hunt, the large lion hunt, like the chasing of the merchants from the temple, which I know that Goya saw because of the kind of documental work that I've done on it. There are compositional elements, these kind of very strong diagonals, very sharp diagonal lines, which is something that Goya could have learned, again, from the point of view of composition, from Rembrandt. Of course, Goya's scenes in the Disastres have nothing to do with Rembrandt, no? It has to do with Goya's reality, quote unquote, with the world that was around him. But artists mix things. They mix what they have learned from other artists with the world around them. They have to, because they have to learn, right? They have to have a basis in composition, in design, in the use of light and shadow, in the use of tonal values. So what Goya gleans from Rembrandt is that, but then of course the subject matter is totally his own, and it has to do with his own experience, his own life, and his own world.
Well, thank you very much for being with us.
I hope you get something out of that.